Like, before you press record.
Conversation with Sia. I'd like to start in a weird place because, like you,
like, before you press record, I'm like,
oh yeah,
starting in a weird place because before you press record, I was like, you were telling me that I had, if I wanted, I could edit anything if I had felt embarrassed about what I said or something like that.
Of course.
And you very kindly, and I said, so I could do this interview on ketamine.
It's true. You absolutely could.
If only I'd known.
And if only you'd known. And, you know, as I said when you mentioned that, speaking as someone who may or may not have experience with ketamine, that you often sound better to yourself than you do to other people.
Well, I actually do get ketamine infusions for my chronic
you do?
pain. So, but in LA, they do it where you're totally out. So you don't feel, you're not lucid at all, and you don't have
really
the trip at all. But here in this other place where I'm at right now, trying to maintain some modicum of privacy, they're more east meets west. So it's a doctor, and they do the infusion, but they also do like a sort of intention, and they hit the metal bowl and say, "What's your intention?" Like, well, want the pain to turn from red to blue, or blah blah blah. And that I actually had lucid experiences, and that as a sober woman has been really fascinating.
I imagine so. I did a sequence of 5 intravenous ketamine infusions over the span of 2 weeks because I had read about its application to suicidal ideation and chronic pain separately.
Yep.
And wanted to have the firsthand experience, not because I was suicidal, but because to recommend it to anyone who might come to me with suicidal ideation, I wanted to have the firsthand experience to see what the effects and side effects were like at different dosages. And I found it to have a very surreal dissociative effect, just subjectively. What I didn't expect, because I wasn't thinking about it for the chronic pain, I had this acute pain in my mid-back, this neurological pain that had plagued me for years. And then I noticed a few weeks after ending the ketamine, no pain in my mid-back. It was near miraculous. What
incredible.
What has been your experience, and what?
Yeah, that's my experience too. And I mean, that was my experience even when I wasn't doing in LA, when I was doing it not lucidly. And then and as a sober woman doing it lucidly, that was very confronting. And I thought I was going to have a bad trip. I'm a bad tripper. I'm like, I've never had a good trip. Anytime I did acid, it was bad. I'm a bad tripper. Make sure you give me lots of Versed, which is like a sedative. And then he explained to me that the more Versed he gave me, the more ketamine he would have to give me. And that if he could give me less Versed, he could give me less ketamine, and that would be nicer for my body. And so he ended up giving me half the dose that I get in LA, but he also gave me half the dose of Versed. And I had just a wonderful time. I just had a wonderful time. I was like, he writes down everything you say. And so afterwards, he was like, okay, so here we go. Here's the things that you said. I am a microbe. Am I upside down? Am I upside down? Oh, okay. Am I dying? Oh, okay, I'm not dying, because they'll lift the earphones off because they've got theta wave music and stuff going on in your ears and stuff, and they'll say, "No, Sia, you're not dying. You're just focus on your intention." And with the one in LA, I would never wake up or even be conscious enough to know or to say, "Am I dying?" And so I found it quite. As someone who has had suicidal ideation, what worked for me actually was Prozac in the end. I hadn't tried ketamine for that, but I had complex PTSD. I believe I may have gotten through it in the last 3 years, I've done so much painful work. But yeah, I barely left the house, and I would only go to like Yeezy's Sunday service because I loved the singing so much, and I fell in love with the Kardashians. They're so nice, and I felt safe around them. It was such an interesting experience, and so I would stay at home mostly, and I have a projector that projects television or movies, whatever, onto the ceiling, and above my bed, and so I basically just lie prone. And is that the word, prone?
Yeah, that would be. Let me think about this. Prone, supine. I believe prone. I believe you got it right. Is that right? I think prone might be stomach down. Like if you're in a prone position. In any case, you're on your bed on your back.
I'm on my bed on my back with my face up, looking at this enormous projector screen pretty much 16 hours a day for 3 years. And only leave the house on Sundays to go to the Sunday service and sing my heart out and clap and dance around. And I was having a lot of suicidal ideation, and because of this chronic pain, and because I guess I have an attachment injury, and I'm really into attachment theory. And so, but I believe I may have earned secure attachment, which is going to mean nothing to so many of your listeners. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about attachment theory if anybody's interested. I think it's the cutting edge of it's based on science, and it's the cutting edge of where psychology is going and should be going is attachment theory, and it's pretty new.
Well, let's talk about it, because I've had a book recommended to me a number of times. I've not read it. Fortunately for me, I have a girlfriend who synthesized it for me, but the book Attached.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe
wrong stuff in there. That's the only reason I don't recommend it. It also just refers to you. It's like it's the baby version. So yes, as baby, you're either ambivalent, avoidant, or preoccupied. But as we grow, we develop these strategies that happen in the first 10 months of our life. Based on the care that we're given, we develop one of 5 strategies, and sometimes disorganized, all of them, like maybe all 5. So the strategies are dismissive, preoccupied, fearful avoidant, which is now called disorganized, unresolved, and secure. Which nobody in Hollywood is. Actually, that's not true. I think John Legend might be secure. He's so nice. But yeah, there's so I took an AAI, which is called an Attachment Assessment Inventory. I send it off to Harvard, and there's like 3 people that work in that department, and they study the interview and the language and the tone, because it's recorded as well. And then they report back this attachment theory, which was started by John Bowlby in the 40s or something, but really only came to light in 1984 or 85. I can't remember. I'll say a lot of wrong things here.
It's okay. That's what show notes are for. Don't worry.
But I do know that in the first 10 months of your life, you are basically told who you are and what to experience in the world and how to behave and how to respond in any situation. It all happens in the first 10 months of your life based on the care that you're given. So I was complexly disorganized when I met George Haas, who has been helping me with my attachment repair. I mean, I'm so excited because I'd got one of my son has had an attachment assessment interview, and he was less complexly disorganized than me, and I was so happy for him because I've actually managed to earn some secure categories. So there's different categories. There's 7 categories. I don't know what they are. I'm not that smart, but I just know that I have 2 left on me that that aren't secure, that are both fear related. The last time I took an attachment, but I started with only one secure feature, so out of 7, and now I have 5.
Seems like a big improvement.
Yeah, so and also I guess I should say that attachment injury is addiction. It causes addiction. It's not a genetic disorder. It's not a disease. It's an attachment injury that occurred in the first 10 months of your life. And that doesn't mean your parents were bad or mean or cruel. They may have been benignly neglectful, or maybe their dog died the day that you were born, or, there's so many reasons why your primary caregiver may have been preoccupied or unable to care for you, unable to give you the things that you needed for your brain to develop properly, securely. So, yeah, it was about 50%, I think, of the population is secure. That's if you take out poverty, and then otherwise it's about 30%.
How have you found studying attachment theory, doing the assessment, doing the work has impacted your life? I mean, it seems like you've certainly made a study of it and taken it seriously. What are the outcomes that you've seen in your life, or the changes?
Well, I'm not afraid anymore. I've spent my whole entire life being extremely afraid. I've been, and it's especially in personal relationships, interpersonal relationships. I've had the attachment strategy that I have had was, previously called fearful avoidant, and now is called disorganized. And I was complexly fearfully avoidant. and what that means is that the care was inconsistent. So you just don't know what you're going to get. So you keep turning around and putting your arms out. If you imagine a toddler, so you put your arms out and you say, maybe this time they'll pick me up. No? Okay, maybe this time. And you keep imagining a toddler turning around and putting their arms in the air, and maybe they'll get kicked in the chest, or maybe they'll get picked up. You never know. And, so there's just I'm not saying that my parents kicked me in the chest. That's an extreme analogy or metaphor. What is it? Is it an analogy or a metaphor? I don't know, parallel.
Well, it depends, I guess, if they literally kick you in the chest or not. So since they didn't, I guess.
I don't think they kicked me in the chest. I'm pretty sure they did. But, you just or if they didn't come when you cried. If they didn't come, there's these 7 stages, like a baby, right? So the baby looks cute. First thing it does when it needs something, or it's in pain, or it needs to eat, or it needs its nappy changed, or it's uncomfortable, first thing it does is it looks cute. And the second thing it does is, when that doesn't work to get the attention of the caregiver, they look confused. And then they'll whimper. And then they'll intermittently cry. I think that's what's next. And then that's when you should definitely pick them up, when they're intermittently crying. Then the next one will become crying. And then the next one is tantrum, this full screaming, like anger, rage, like, why is nobody coming to get me? And then the baby's brain goes into complete limbic shutdown because it thinks it's going to die. So people who sleep train their babies who think that it works, yeah, it works because your baby thinks it's going to die and it gives up on life and stops crying. So it only works if you go back in there at that intermittent crying point. And if you go in when they're intermittent crying and you say, I love you, baby's name, let's say George. I love you, George. But it's time to go to sleep now, but we're just right out here. And that creates object constancy, which makes for way less psychos in the world. And way less people like waiting by the phone, waiting for the text. So what happens to people who didn't get picked up during the intermittent crying phase, or didn't get just at least reassured during the intermittent crying phase, if they were left and they got into limbic shutdown, now as adults, when someone that has captured their projection, like a person, like a partner, like a love interest or something, a person of great interest to you, captures your projection, and you text them, and then if they don't text you back, you start to feel sick and panicky. And what's actually happening is just the same thing as when you're a baby. It was the seventh stage of limbic shutdown. So all the same neurochemicals that were dumped into your body when you're a baby and you thought, I'm going to die because nobody's coming, that happens as an adult. The exact same brain chemistry happens. And so all these human adults are, sitting at home waiting for a text, feeling like they're going to die. Like, there's so many of them. And it's like, it's not everybody. Secure people don't feel that way. But people who are preoccupied or disorganized, fearfully avoidant, they do. And they suffer greatly because of it. And it's merely because nobody came and reassured them at the intermittent crying point when they were a baby that they're okay, it's time to go back to sleep now. Then they leave the room. Then the baby, if it does a thing, it does a cry, the cute, confused, whimper, intermittent cry. Then they go in, reassure them again. Then time to go to sleep, George. And if you do that, that's actually healthy sleep training, as long as you do that at the intermittent crying part. But if you leave a baby to cry, just cry it out, you're damaging them forever and ever. And actually you're creating an addict without knowing.
Well, let me ask,
yeah.
if I could, just because you mentioned you're talking about upbringing, you're talking about, on some level, it seems like, unpredictability as a factor. That's one of the factors that might lead to this fearful, avoidant, now just disorganized complex of sorts. Could you speak to, in the course of doing homework for this conversation, I came across a discussion of, and this is not to pin everything on a single parent or either both parents, but your dad having two different personalities with two different names. Could you speak to this?
Yeah, he had his real name is Phil, but he had a bad temper sometimes, and when he would have his bad temper, he would seemingly turn into a different person, and then he would come back from being angry, and he'd be like, sorry about that, sorry about Stan's behavior, sorry about that, darling, sorry about that. And so when I grew up, I thought, watching all the movies, I thought, he has multiple personality disorder. And finally, when I was 25, I thought everyone's dad had two personalities until I was like 25. But then I realized that, no, I don't know whether it was, and it's now called dissociative identity disorder. It's not called multiple personality disorder. It's also misrepresented hugely in the media because nobody who has multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, which is what it's called now, DID, is dangerous or mean or angry. Well, actually, they can be angry, but they're all basically parts of a constellation of an abused child that have split off to protect the original soul, like from the abuser. So they're all there just simply as protectors. So when we watch movies like Split, we sort of demonize people with DID. And I also now think, I don't know if my dad had DID. I think maybe he was just smoking too much weed or, I don't know. I really don't know now, but we've talked about it. I asked him recently, we had a really good repair. I asked him recently, because he mentioned Stan in a text message, and I said, hey, Dad, when you talk about Stan, what happens to me is that I get a whole bunch of fearful neurochemicals that dump into my body, and it makes me super anxious, and then I get shaky, and it takes me about at least 20 minutes for my liver to be able to process it all. And could you do me a favor and could we never talk about Stan ever again? And he said yes. And then he wrote a really beautiful message that was something like, I'm sorry, that must have been really painful for your fragile young psyche, and I'm ashamed and embarrassed.
Wow.
And I'm sorry. And that was such a powerful moment. And then he sent me a picture of him standing by my crib when I was born.
Mm.
And I was like, I burst into tears. It was like,
Wow.
it was that he was showing me the father that he'd wanted to be, you know? And
Yeah.
and so I can't, but I believe he was my primary caregiver. I don't really know. I know my mum got really depressed after I was born because she had previously lost a baby and she got postnatal depression. And so I think some of that, the depression, so if you have a blank face when you're staring at your baby, it's really scary to them, just so you know, people. It's really, and I didn't know that, but apparently if you got a blank face when you're staring at your baby, it's really scary to them. That to be animated is really helpful to them, and showing delight is really helpful, and your baby needs eye contact for the first 10 months from 6 to 12 inches from their face. They need eye contact, love, delight, hugs, and just love and attention, you know? And then you end up with a secure baby. But you can also smother them and then you'll get a preoccupied.
Yeah, gotta find the Goldilocks approach. I want to mention before I lose the observation that the delivery you just recounted to your dad, that phrasing, seemed to be a really good use of textbook nonviolent communication.
Oh,
the way you phrased it was sort of textbook, not in a bad way. I mean, it really.
I did watch it. It was 6 hours. I watched
Marshall. I'm blanking on his last name,
exactly.
but the
nonviolent communication guy.
Yeah. It's very subtle and very powerful when it's used well, which it sounds like you did when you spoke to your dad, in a way, avoiding the type of, or mitigating the likelihood of somebody having a really strong defensive response.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess I learned if you say I feel, and then at the end you say what do you think, or you say, well, this is what makes me feel. This is how it makes me feel, or if I use science, which I'm getting smarter at now in terms of neurochemistry and the brain and pain and psychology, and also, parenting and attachment parenting and that sort of stuff. I just am so in love with it because it's going to create I want to help people create secure babies so that we have so many less people, in pain.
And it seems like one way, or a very important way of doing that, is working on yourself, right? And I just want to provide a little bit of context here for people who are listening, and that is, I've loved your music, both the music where you are a performer and then the music unknown to me oftentimes has been written by you. It's really astonishing how many songs I have on playlists that when I finally had my my Kobayashi, like Kaiser Sose moment, and I was like, oh my God, like it's everywhere. Sia's work is everywhere in my life. That
I'm like cobwebs, babe.
so that's part one. And then a reader of mine named Brian Elliott recommended, after I wrote a blog post on a lot of the downsides of being public facing and having an audience, recommended a profile of you called How Sia Saved Herself, which was in Rolling Stone. And
Pharrell wrote that.
That's right. And it completely captured my imagination and talked about many of the decisions you've made, which, to borrow some phrasing that I've heard you use, has allowed you to use your gifts without hurting yourself, right? Without just destroying your serenity. And we're going to talk about that. I just wanted to give that story because how Sia saved herself, I think in order to save your kids, even if they haven't been born yet, it's important to work on yourself. But you're clearly doing and have done a lot of that. I want to ask you a this was where the I want to start somewhere weird came up
Oh, cool.
a while back.
Yeah.
And it relates, well, it makes me think of a novel that really caught my imagination when I was a young kid, and that was Around the World in 80 Days. And I thought, well, maybe I'll start with Around the World of Sia in 80 Tattoos. You have quite a few tattoos. I wanted to ask about a few of them.
Okay.
And I haven't seen all of these. I've just read about a few of them. So tell me if they're not accurate. But do you have a tattoo that says "Don't think"?
Yeah. That was before I actually got into meditation and realized that the irony of that tattoo. Because telling yourself not to think is thinking.
Yeah, right. Don't think of the pink elephant. Don't think of the pink elephant.
Yeah, so I realized, so for all your listeners who don't meditate, meditation is just a practice. It's nothing fancy. It's just breathing. It's like if you can just breathe and feel the air going in your nose and out your nose, like, and count to 10 and just be present with that feeling of the air touching your nostrils and do that, that's a practice. And then if you have a thought, that's okay. And it takes you away, like in a car, like say you get in the car with the thought and it takes you for a drive, that's okay. Just when you realize, just go, oh, whoops, and go back to 1 and start counting from 1 again. And that's practice. It's just concentration practice. And then there are all sorts of other practices that you can sort of like delve into after that. But it is just concentration practice is so good for your brain and so good for your heart and your spirit. And the thing is when I hear people say, oh, I can't meditate, I'm not good at it, there's no being good at it because it's a practice. You can't be bad at it, actually. The only way of being bad at it is not doing it. George Haas is my meditation teacher, and there's periods where I've gotten extremely low over the last 3 or 4 years, and there were periods where I totally dipped out on meditating. And he'd come over, I'd be crying, I'd be whatever, like super, super suicidal, whatever. And he'd come over and he'd go, have you thought about meditation? It's free. There's data that says that it will help you. And I'll be like, fuck off, George. And oh, how we laughed.
What does your practice look like? The mutual friend who introduced us when we finally started communicating directly has a TM practice, right? So I'm sure does many other things, but has a transcendental meditation practice, 20 minutes twice a day.
Yeah. I don't want
the first to be done.
That, but I don't think you should have to pay for meditation. And also, I know the secret. I know what they do, and I'm sure you do too. That, your mantra is just related to your age. And I think if anything helps you, do it. And if that's what you found, and great, and it helps you, then do it. But I don't believe that meditation should be paid for. I don't believe that it's anything you can be given. I think that it should be a dana process and that it should be by donation only. That's just my personal opinion. Because
what does your practice look like?
Oh, so mine is just like about like probably 20 minutes a day. I will either listen to George's podcast at least once a week. I listen to George's podcast, which is I think Meta Group. George Haas, I don't know, attachment repair, something.
I'll find it.
Put it in the links. But it's very heady. I've said to him recently, George, you need to do like an attachment repair for dummies because anyone I send to your podcast, that it's really hard for them to understand. It's really heady. And it did take me 2 or 3 years to understand it myself. And that's with him repeating himself for 3 years over and over again.
Yeah. It's meditation times attachment. Meditation X attachment with George Haas, HAAS.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, okay, my practice looks like this. Well, I'll do concentration practice where I count, or so Shinzen is George's teacher. So I guess I'm using Shinzen's model, and that model is also like I do. It's feel in, feel out. So you can, like, what you're feeling in your body, or what you can feel on the outside of your body. Or hear in, hear out is what you can hear inside your head, or what you can hear outside of your head, exterior noise, like external noise. And then there's see in and see out, so that's like visual imagery, or you can look at a leaf and watch it just wave. And the best one for me is hear out. So that's what I do. And I think that's the best one for people who have extreme, like, complex trauma, because it's externalizing in a way and keeps you grounded in the present moment. So right now, let's say, okay, I'm meditating right now. So I'm listening to the sound of my air conditioner and the sound of your breathing. Mm-hmm. And that's hear out. And then when I get carried away with a thought, I just come back to hear out. That's what I do. So hear out is the one that I find the most easy, which is just focusing on all the noises around me externally that are in this perceived reality.
Just a quick thanks to one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. I get asked all the time what I would take if I could only take one supplement. The answer is inevitably Athletic Greens. I view it as my all-in-one nutritional insurance. I recommended it in 2010 in the 4-Hour Body, and I did not get paid to do so. I've used it ever since. Developed from a complex blend of 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, Athletic Greens is a greens powder engineered to help fill the nutritional gaps in your diet. So I always try to do things through whole foods, but this covers my bases. Right now, Athletic Greens is offering you